Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to talk to you about the books that I read in March. I'm not going to be discussing all the books I read in March for like the first time ever. Normally a wrap-up video, I discuss every book that I read, but I did just post a video not that long ago talking about all the books that I read for middle grade March, and I did it vlog style throughout the month, so you're getting like very fresh thoughts right when I finish those books. But I did read 8 books for middle grade March, which is a lot. That's something I love about middle grade March is it's easy to plow through a whole bunch of middle grade because they're so short, and even some of those were manga volumes. So there was so much that I got through, and I don't really want to rehash all of that here. So if you want to hear about all the books that I read for middle grade March, I will have that video linked and you can go check it out. In addition to the books that I read for middle grade March, I did read 5 other books. Well, technically 6, but I'm still working on one of them, which is The Mill and the Floss, and I mentioned that in my TBR video. But I completed 5 books other than my middle grade March books, so that's what this video is going to be. I didn't have a stellar reading month in March, and I think part of that was just life was life, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And so I think that maybe some of these could have been more highly rated if I'd read them at a different time. I don't know. I didn't have any 5-star reads at all during the month of March, except for one reread, which was a middle grade book, and everything else was just, I did have a decent amount of 4 stars and 3 stars, but nothing just like really hit me as a new favorite, although I did have one book that came close. And that's the only fantasy book I read this month, which is Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. This was very, very close to a 5-star read, but it didn't quite make it there. This is the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy and her overarching Realm of the Elderlings series. So, like I said, this is the 3rd trilogy, I think. Yeah, it's the 3rd trilogy out of 5 series that make up this greater world. So I was really excited to be back with Fitz and the Fool, which I have shared with you before when I've talked about these books. And at the time of me filming this, I have already started the final book of the Tawny Man trilogy. And I still really, really liked Golden Fool. There was a lot that was going on, but it definitely kind of had a little bit of middle book syndrome in a trilogy, and that a lot of this book was very much set up for what we're going to end up accomplishing in the final book of this trilogy. There are a lot of things that were introduced, a lot of problems that were introduced, a lot of characters that we met for the first time, but I didn't feel like any of the plot lines were even remotely resolved, and I don't expect plot lines to be like totally fulfilled, in the second book of a trilogy. But I felt like it was just laying a lot of groundwork and giving us a lot of lore. However, because this is Robin Hobb, I had a fantastic time with it. But there were just a few times, like once I reached the end or was close to the end, that I'm like, oh, like we're not going to get anything about this particular thing or this thing over here. We're gonna have to wait for the next book. So I just found that like a little bit less satisfying than it could have been, but I had a great time, even though it felt like nothing really happened. There were a lot of things that did happen. So I know this sounds so contradictory, but I still really did enjoy this book a lot. One thing that I really did enjoy about this series is that we got to see some characters again from the Live Ship Traders series, which was really cool and unexpected, and I didn't think that was going to happen. I won't say who or the situation why they're there because I don't want spoilers, but it was just cool because I wasn't expecting them to show up there. I have a couple of translated books here that I want to talk about. Well, one of them's manga, but I'm just lumping it in with translated because that's easier. Both of the books are actually Japanese books. So Attack on Titan, volume 25, still going at the rate of about 1 volume a month-ish for this series. And I did like this one because we're kind of getting a little bit of a going back to some of the characters. That was something that I complained about with a couple of previous volumes before this, is that I was missing some of the main characters, and we get a little bit more of that in this volume, as well as some like really interesting explorations about kind of like, do the ends justify the means, and do you become the thing that you're trying to eradicate in order to eradicate that thing? I thought that there were some really interesting conversations that were happening here surrounding morality and ethics with war and different things like that yeah, I just found very thought-provoking. So I did enjoy this volume more than the previous 2 volumes, but it still was like not not pinnacle. I think it was probably like a 4-star out of them. So it was not 5-star. It didn't have anything like that was really earth shattering for me, but I did find it to be a really interesting volume, and I am really interested to continue on. The other Japanese book that I read this month was a cozy Japanese book. So completely opposite of Attack on Titan. And that is the Vanishing Cherry Tree Blossom Bookshop, I think. I think that's what I wrote down. It's kind of a long title. It's a little wordy. I'm sure it's less wordy in Japanese. So basically in this story, people are going through various things in their lives and revisiting a book. And they'll be somewhere and it's in the springtime and there's this beautiful like weeping willow style cherry tree blossom tree. And when they repeat a certain line of this book and read it at the same time as the person that's in this bookshop magically appears that wasn't there before. And they're able to go in and talk with this person, and there's a cat involved as well. So there's a lot of like magical elements that are really interesting, really creative. But this book didn't really have an emotional punch for me. I thought it was interesting the way that the author actually tied this all together and gave us answers as to why this bookshop exists, how it came into existence. But I felt like the only story that actually had anything to do with that was the first and final story. So the other stories that take place in here felt like they didn't matter and didn't connect. And I feel like it would have made more sense if we'd had like the first story and then the final story and then maybe one more story after that to kind of show how this bookshop is continuing to fulfill like its purpose or mission or whatever. I just didn't find it to be overall very engaging, which is a shame because I love the idea of this bookshop that magically appears to people in their time of need and brings them back to something really important or nostalgic, or, you know, I love that because I love the power of books to help you work through difficult things in your life and make you feel seen and cared about and all of those things. So there were things about it that I really liked, and I did like the idea of it, but I just didn't connect to it. So I just thought it was kind of okay. I found myself bored for a lot of it, unfortunately. I only finished one classic during the month of March, and that's Maggie Now. I have a bind up of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and Maggie Now that I got at the thrift store years and years ago. So I purchased this because I wanted a copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn after I read it, and it just happened to have Maggie Now. So it's been sitting on my shelves for a really long time. I'm happy I finally read it. I read it with Dia. And this is a story of a young girl who is the daughter of an Irish immigrant who moves to New York City. And honestly, the first part of this book feels very much like his story because it's his story in Ireland and then him coming to New York City, him getting married, having children. And then from that point on, I want to say it's probably like 20 to 25% of the story. We follow his daughter, who is Maggie Now, and her growing up in New York City and falling in love, coming of age, all of those kinds of things. I really liked Maggie as a character. I thought she was great. There was this deep sincerity about her that sometimes manifested as naivete, especially when she was younger. But there was just this wholeheartedness to her that I just really loved. Like what you saw was what you got with her. And when she loved, she went all in. She was very loyal in her love for her family and the person she ends up falling in love with. But I just felt like there are a lot of other characters in this story that I felt like were not great to her, which is fine. I mean, the same thing kind of happens with The Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but once you reach the end, there's kind of this pinnacle of why the things happened the way that they did and this really beautiful moment of growth. And I felt like we did not get that in Maggie Now at all, which is really unfortunate. I found myself very unsatisfied by the end of this book because all these things happened and I got to the end and I was just kind of like, why? What was the purpose of this book? Like, it wasn't a super engaging story. It wasn't, it didn't have like an overarching theme. And so it was just really, I couldn't like pinpoint why this book was written and why I read it, which sounds so mean. The writing itself was good. And like I said, I liked Maggie as a character, but I didn't like any of the other characters. I didn't really like the story itself. And so I just, at the end, I was like, okay, I'm withholding judgment because while I really enjoyed A Tree Grows in Brooklyn while I was reading it, and I did really like it, it was the end of that book that pushed it over into the 5-star territory. So I kept withholding judgment, thinking Maggie now is going to do the same thing. Like, this book is fine. It's still not as good as A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I'm still not as engaged. But when we get to the end, it's going to push it over into, at least a 4-star territory. And it did not do that, which is really unfortunate. I feel very unsatisfied with this book. The last book that I'm going to talk about is probably categorized as literary fiction, and I read it for my in-person book club. That's Theo of Golden by Alan Levi. This book is making the rounds. This is so many people's favorite book of the year last year, and some people are already saying that this is for sure going to be their favorite book of this year. So super, super popular, super buzzy right now. It's a story of an old man named Theo who just shows up one day in this little town called Golden in Georgia. And he ends up frequenting this coffee shop. In the coffee shop, there's a wall of these really beautiful portraits that are done by a local artist. And there's, I want to say, 80 something portraits on the wall. And Theo ends up inquiring with the barista / owner about these portraits and kind of finds out some information about them and decides that he's going to purchase these portraits for the people that they were of and make sure that they end up with the rightful person that they should be with. And so he goes on this mission of kindness to distribute these portraits, and in the process ends up endearing himself to this town of Golden and building connections with people. There's a lot of really beautiful themes in this book that feel really important for our world today. Themes of love and kindness and acceptance of others, and just being a person who's thinking so much of others and encouraging others. And I think that when people read this book, everyone wants a Theo in their life, and I feel like everyone should want to be a Theo in the way that he behaves towards others and is so kind and loving towards them. So a lot of really great things about this book. However, this book really missed the mark for me a little bit. And again, part of that could have been that it was a weird month for me. Maybe I would have rated it higher in a different time. But I felt like the book as a whole was pretty shallow, even though it had really beautiful themes. I feel like a lot of the characters are very underdeveloped, including Theo himself, and that we don't find out why he's in this town or really anything about him as a person until the last 50 pages of the book or so. And so we spend a lot of time meandering. We spend a lot of time with him getting to know these people. Because of that, he's distributing so many different portraits, and you just get these bam in quick succession with him, with these different people, immediately spilling their life stories to him. And there's not really any time for you to actually connect to these characters or care about them. And then we go on long tangents where he has conversations with artists or with other people in the town, and they go on long conversations of what does art really mean, or what about this thing or this thing over here, or long processes on how port wine is made. And then we have another chapter, this whole chapter in excruciating detail of a cello performance that was way too detail heavy and was way too bogged down. And so I feel like the book felt kind of a little bit scattered for me without really deep character development. And because we didn't have the deep character development, I felt like I didn't connect to the story in the way that a lot of other people do. I get why people love this. The writing is really beautiful. The prose is lovely, but the story itself felt pretty repetitive as these portraits keep being distributed, these connections keep happening. And we do see some of these people that he gives portraits to, we see them again. But even those things, they felt so disconnected and spread out that I couldn't really latch on to anybody. And because I couldn't latch on to anybody, this book didn't have an emotional impact on me. I think most of the people I've talked to about this book say they were in tears, say that they would give it more than 5 stars if they could. And I didn't have an emotional reaction to this book at all, which is really disappointing. I wanted to love this book so badly, but don't be put off by my review of this, because I am by far in the minority. And like I said, I think the writing's lovely. I think the themes are really beautiful and really meaningful in today's world where people are too busy to give each other the time of day. And so I think that there's a lot of beauty to be found within the pages of this book. And I think that it works for most people. I'm in the minority. So if you loved this book, this is not me criticizing that because I see why people do love it. Well, those are the non-middle grade books that I completed in the month of March. I have great hopes for the month of April that it will hopefully be a better reading month for me. Hopefully I will have a 5-star in there somewhere. I've actually only had 2 5-star reads this whole year that have not been rereads. So hopefully I will break out and have a new 5-star book that I'm just absolutely in love with and really excited to gush about in the month of April. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned here, definitely love to hear your thoughts. And let me know what you read in the month of March. I hope you found a new favorite. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.